Hi everyone, and welcome to the Remain Indoors podcast, where we'll be looking at some lighter news from around the internet, speaking to some interesting people from our podcast and radio network, and having a grumble when required. Remain Indoors. Hi guys, I'm your host, Richard Spanners Ready, and I'm joined by my co-host, Matt Two Rumpets. Matt, we haven't podcasted together in over 14 hours.
Is it that many? It's just hard to believe. It seems like a century since I saw you last.
Like I hung up on you on the call yesterday, went to bed, woke up, bit of homeschool, and here we are back again. And this, though, is the kind of stream where we're not obligated to stick just to a topic. Or like yesterday, we talked about cheating in Formula One. And we had a racing driver on there who absolutely 100% insisted that wearing lead boots during the weigh-in to make himself seem heavier and then taking them off to racing so he'd be lighter wasn't cheating. Still getting over that, to be honest, Matt.
It's not cheating because it's not prescribed by the regulations. Again, I say if the luggage has to weigh 10 kilos and I take all the heavy things out and put them in my coat pocket and my luggage weighs 9 kilos, then I haven't violated the regulations at all. Now, have I?
I've just learned that basically you and Brad are just terrible people. That's what I learned yesterday.
Now we just know how to read.
Good. You know what? You've cheered me up already. Matt. Last night I was feeling pretty low, like not just whatever chemicals were going on in my body. I wasn't feeling amazing. Went to bed feeling low, woke up feeling, much the same. And I was going to come on here and kind of brush it off because this is such a positive thing in my life, coming in here and speaking to you and our guests. It would be very easy to come on here, smile for an hour and pretend that I wasn't feeling down. But given that we're in this kind of situation at the moment, I'm figuring that I'm not alone in feeling like that. And everybody's had little ups and downs or had to deal with their partners feeling up or down as well. Because you've got the double jeopardy now. You don't just have to deal with your own feelings. The feelings are infectious. So if you're in the house with someone who's having a hard time, that very quickly spreads to you as well.
Yeah, I've long felt that in a relationship, this is one of the most challenging aspects of it, is that you tend to take on the feelings of your partner. And it's really important sometimes to be able to dissociate from that a bit and understand what's going on. Understand that their grumpiness does not have to be my grumpiness.
Yeah.
Or their unhappiness doesn't have to be my unhappiness. And vice versa. I mean, you need to be able to make that point clearly to the person that you're with, and they need to be able to understand it-ish.
Okay, and to weigh in on that, let's also bring in our fellow Missed Apex podcaster, Nick Numbers Alexander. Firstly, how's it going, Nick? And secondly, I know you wanted to weigh in on that.
It's going fine. It is 6 a.m. on Monday, so starting my week off right by joining you guys and doing something creative and positive.
Yep.
And here in America, at least, probably in the UK as well, I'm not sure, we have the expression happy wife, happy life. Do you guys say that as well?
Not out loud, maybe. Yes, we definitely do have that, of course, yes.
Okay, happy wife, happy life. And so I say that, and my wife always responds, trying to be inclusive, that it's actually happy spouse, happy house. But we all know which spouse's happiness is more important and which one rubs off more on the other, don't we?
Those are the views of Nick Alexander from What's It About podcast, a podcast, believe it or not, about books, would you believe? And we'll talk about that later, Nick. But that is a podcast you do. But it's not just, we're not going to sit here and say it's only miserable wives that make the lockdown miserable. I genuinely myself, like I'm sure a lot of people have been, just felt that feeling of being down, Matt. And as we know, it can be a spiral. So not only was I feeling low, but then I came off the podcast yesterday going, oh my God, you're a terrible presenter and podcaster. What are you even doing making podcasts? I had to go and listen back to the show to check that I wasn't just being a moron. And then also, I woke up this morning and I don't feel pretty. My hair is ridiculous. I feel fat. I've put away the scales. I'm not even looking at them until the end of the lockdown. But, most of these things aren't true. I'm probably not a hideous football. I'm probably not ugly and stupid looking. Or as my wife said, is it me or do you look a bit Mexican today? She said it as if it was an insult. I don't see that as an insult. That's just what she said. But it's like it's a crisis of confidence. And to my wife's credit, she was hyping me up this morning. So she was being my hype man. She's like, hey, look, you achieved this thing. You achieved this thing. The children are not on fire. And she has to kind of like talk me down off that perch. But we all need that. We all need that because I think in these times, and I know I'm waffling, Matt, in these times we can feel a bit ridiculous. And I feel ridiculous doing the things we're doing because they're not the things we used to do. So I feel ridiculous because I'm measuring my worth as a homeschool teacher when I'm not a professional teacher, measuring my worth by putting on, live non-F1 shows during the day. And that's not something that I'm used to valuing my self-worth against. So it's so easy to feel like you're failing.
Yeah, it is. And it's important to understand, I think. I don't know. It's important to understand, at least for me. And thanks, Caterham Nut, who says the last night's this morning's show was awesome. So don't fear, Spanner. So
Hooray.
Your audience is giving you more positive reinforcement there. And I know you do kind of live for that. But I find it weird. It's like your mood becomes an amplifier of your emotions. So if I'm down, then like, a minor hiccup starts to become a focal point. It's like a hot spot for you, and it gets harder and harder. And I will just say that I read online, I'm not going to say I'm perfect at taking this advice, but I did at the beginning of this whole sea change in how we are currently living.
Well done for not calling it an apocalypse.
It's going to be really important that you just simply it's going to be very important that you simply rid of existing expectations you had and make sure that your new expectations are set appropriately low, because this is very different for everybody, and you shouldn't expect out of yourself or your family that which you had previously gotten, because all of your circumstances has changed, and I think have changed. Oh my gosh.
No, it's
too early in the morning for
No,
parents,
it's too early for your internet as well. That's the first time we've had an internet warble out of you for ages and ages. So they must be downloading many educational programs in the background there, Matt. But look, thank you to Caterham Nut in the live chat. And hello to all the live chat. Adam, Mr. Phil, The Rue, John, and others, and other John, who says... children are surprisingly non-combustible. I wouldn't take much credit for that. You get my point. All my children have survived the lockdown so far. But you need a hype man, Nick. So I am just going to say to the live chat, tell us what you think you're failing at, and we will read it out here, and we will give you a semi-sincere hype up that you're doing great. How's about that, Nick?
I'm going to start by hyping you up. I think John McClintock is wrong. I think children probably are more combustible than he realizes. I mean, they have hair, don't they? And
Yeah.
They haven't been getting their hair cut. So that's just all this flammable material that you're not lighting ablaze. So good work, Spanners.
Thank you.
Having occasionally caught my own hair on fire, I can testify to its combustibility.
Okay.
Not one time, not this funny time, just occasionally. So that
Hey, look,
leads me to believe...
I'm someone who's set my house on fire a couple of times. Okay, fine, a few times. Fine, get off my case. Who are you, the police?
Well, we learned that runs in your family.
Yeah, no, it does. My grandma burnt her house fully, gutted it from the kitchen up by drunkenly hanging. Did I tell this story on here? I think I told it on the radio. She was drunkenly hanging towels, hand towels. She would hang them over where the flame is. Like, why would you do that? I don't know. But she did cooking drunk a lot. Yeah, and she set fire to her house. Yeah, mine was less. One was an electrical fire, and the other one probably an appliance fire. But anyway, I still have managed to not burn any children at all. Hey, look, we've got our first failure in the chat room, Nick, so we need to hype someone up. Trevor Williams has bravely wrote in the chat room that he is failing at not becoming an alcoholic. So do you know what? I'm going to hype you up, Trevor. Whilst we need to moderate and watch and keep control of the alcohol we're drinking, I also am not going to beat up on you for having a few more drinks in what is an extraordinary situation. And I trust you to be aware of that and keep an eye on it, manage it all the way to the lockdown, and then turn it all around at the end.
I'm not going to say we have conversation of the day here on the show, but if we did, the Rue 2012 says, if you see my children locked outside our house during school hours, mind your business. I'm giving them a fire drill.
Oh, do you know what, Nick? That's not a bad shout.
I was looking up a book because I have a book recommendation here. If we could, I know we're hyping people up. If we could get serious for a moment, there is a free audio book by a Mishka Shubaly, which I assume that I don't have to spell that out for you. You got that. But about quitting alcohol cold turkey because it is impossible to go to, Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and that sort of thing at this time. So if someone needs help, there is a free audiobook that just came out on quitting alcohol all by yourself.
Fair enough. And I'm sure we're not suggesting that Trevor is an alcoholic, but I think there's people who are used to saving their relief drinking for the weekend. You get to the end of the week and you go, do you know what? I'm going to sit here and just pound a couple of small cans of IPA, maybe even a whiskey or two, and then that's me settling in for the weekend. Well, we're in a kind of omni weekend now, Nick, and people are just going, well, it's 3:00, time for that relaxing beer.
Well, my author that I interviewed yesterday could not remember what month it was. She was saying she finished her final draft in December, and now it was, who knows what month it was, but it was a while ago.
She just couldn't think of it. She couldn't recall it. I mean, I genuinely got Friday and Saturday mixed up the other day. Adam Rosales, I had 3 beers on Saturday, and it's the most I've drunk in a single day. Well done. Wow, well done, Adam. I mean, how do you make the sad go away? There's a few comments here. John, my challenge, taking mental breaks from all the things going on these days feels awfully similar to procrastination. Now, I think this goes back a little bit to what I was saying up the top, is about managing our expectations and feeling like we're failing. Because in your normal work day, you would go to work, you would complete your tasks over the course of 8 hours, you'd feel pretty good about that, then you would come home and you would play a video game or watch TV. But because we're not achieving our A goals, Matt, because we're not achieving what we normally achieve, we feel guilty about taking a break and doing the normal relaxation that we would do.
Yeah, and it becomes a cycle that gets exceedingly hard to break out of. You expect to be able to accomplish the things you normally accomplish. You can't accomplish them because can you set a date for when you can do X, when you can do Y? Will things change next week? We don't really know because very much from a top-down perspective, we're sort of on a week-to-week basis. You look at the last week, what has happened? Well, then that says what might or might not be possible the next week. We're normally operating on much longer loops of time than that. So, it just makes accomplishing much of anything difficult. And without the sense of accomplishing something positive, then it really does. You just sort of tend to sink into a morass. It's just hard to get, how do I feel motivated about anything if I can't accomplish anything that I'm used to doing? So it's been a challenge, I think, for everybody.
Right, let's go back to a bit of normality. And the only reason I wallowed in self-pity there for just a second, and look, I'm not saying my life is bad, things are going pretty well, but you can't beat yourself up when you face a natural low. And everyone has those natural lows, and some of those natural lows are going to come during this lockdown, which is a very weird time. And it's easy for the voice in your head to tell you that you're failing and you're doing terribly. You're not. We're gunning for you. Let us know in the chat if there's something you're failing at, and we will give you, like we said, a semi-sincere hype up. Let's focus in on our guest, Nick Alexander. You have a podcast. It's about books, which is a brave choice, because TV's really good now and no one really reads books. So you're persisting with it. It's relaunched. The interesting thing I've found about watching this progress unfurl, Nick, is I've seen you go from not at all a podcaster to appearing regularly on a panel, getting very good at being a panelist on a podcast, then starting your own, and then, I think this is a fairly big milestone, your first high-profile interview.
Yeah, it has been quite the journey. You always talk about pod fade. I'm not sure how many podcasts are resurrected from the dead, but we managed to do it. Came back after just slightly over a year's sabbatical. I moved across the country. My co-host Dakota, he moved a couple hours, but he moved as well. We had some life changes, but we are back, and we went from putting out an episode aiming every other week to now we've actually been practically putting out an episode twice a week. We've done 2 book reviews and 2 author interviews in the last 2 weeks, I think, or 2.5 weeks, maybe. And yeah, apparently, if you write authors and tell them that you have a podcast and ask if they'd like to come on your show and promote their stuff, they normally agree. And you say, "Oh, I guess I have to read that book then." And
Yeah.
now you have a job to do. Now you have chores.
Now, that's an interesting angle. See, I hope you don't mind, but I was going to sit and just talk about kind of interview technique in general. Matt has done some stuff on Missed Apex, certainly sat in on interviews, and you've been the interviewer on our Tech Time shows with Matthew Summerfield. We start with authors. Your wife must be familiar as well. For radio guests, I found that exact same thing, Nick. It's really hard to pin people down to radio appearances, but authors, they're free all the time. And they're up for coming on. But as you know, I'm not a huge reader anymore. So what I tend to do with them is I tend to say, look, it's an opportunity to sell your book. On our interview, sell the book to me, and I'll get good content out of that. But no, I never do more than read the blurb. Did you actually sit and read the author's book, Nick?
Yeah, both times. And I like your way if time was really crunched, but I actually really love to fan on the book a bit and ask the questions that I was wondering, why did you decide to do this certain thing? Like, what did this character mean to you? What were you going for? Even the first author that we interviewed, Neil Howell, Calgary, he wrote a kind of traveling circus murder mystery. And he had a scene in the book where the main character was suffering from insomnia. And that scene happened to take place when the circus was in Seattle, for instance. And so I got to ask him, hey, was that an intentional Sleepless in Seattle reference? Or is it just a coincidence? And he said actually that, yes, it was intentional. And no one has ever said anything. I thought it was, too subtle. So that sort of thing where the author that we interviewed yesterday, Amy Stewart from Toronto, another Canadian, she has a thriller missing persons trilogy where the third one's coming out this summer, and I'm halfway through the second one, and I kind of got to say, like, okay, like in the third book, are we finally going to find out what happens with this side character? And I get assured yes. So like this secret access behind the scenes insider knowledge has been like the most fun part of it all.
I suppose, yeah, there's a big difference between what we're doing. So you're like almost like a book review show, whereas I'm just speaking to an interesting guest about their book. To justify it, you have to have more than a 5-minute chat. So I get them on for 5 minutes. Hey, tell me about your book. That sounds crazy. You do a whole book on just daisies that grow quite near rivers. So it's a bit more just bang, bang, bang. So for a book review program, you're getting to talk to them in depth. What's interesting, I guess, is they're very willing to, I guess, because the book market is so competitive, and I'm sure Matt can speak a little about that as well.
Yeah, it's insanely competitive and incredibly poorly paid. This is the remarkable thing. It's kind of like acting, You look at a Hollywood movie star and you're like, wow, actors make tons of money. And then you look at all the people who are actually actors and you realize that, no, actually, they don't make 99.9% of them really don't make very much money at all. And they have to work incredibly hard to have any opportunity whatsoever. And it's been remarkable to me how much marketing authors are expected to do on their own. Pretty much agent, book contract, congratulations, we're publishing your book. All the publicity is on you. There's very little that actually gets done for the average author. Now, if you're a super best-selling wonder hit, then yeah, they'll flog your book from here to Timbuktu. Or if you're well-connected, and we've talked about how connections can play a part in success, haven't we, Spanners? If you're one of those two categories, then you get you get the kid glove treatment. But everybody else, no, you better have your own audience who's going to buy this book, because otherwise we just won't buy your next one.
Right. So I feel like there are a lot of hidden gem books out there because it's exactly like you say. If somebody puts out something with a small publisher and they don't have a lot of connections, they don't have a big social media presence, whatever, they can't do a lot of advertising. It could be the best book in the world, and no one is going to ever find it. I think the first author that we interviewed, Neil Howell, and that's Niall, Neil. He wrote this book called Only Pretty Damned, The Traveling Circus Murder Mystery. And I thought it was 10 out of 10 amazing, but I don't know how many copies he sold. I don't know how much money he made because I don't know how much marketing he was able to do. And it came out of a small time publisher in the Great White North. And on the flip side, there's so much stuff that comes out that is, patently garbage that sells millions and millions of copies. And it's just like, why is everyone reading Twilight, for instance? Like how did this woman become a mega multi-millionaire with this, where there's other people writing really, really quality stuff that you would really have to go out of your way to find?
You sound remarkably like my wife, talking about
I
other books in her category.
I too secretly have a whole series of underappreciated romance novels.
Oh, you do?
No,
No, that was a
I
very
would never tell you.
that was a very deadpan Nick joke. You have to really look out for those, Matt. They'll sneak up on you. They'll get you.
Yeah, well, you do need a straight man to make it funny. That's all I'm going to say.
Nick, how did you find talking to this person, bringing people onto your podcast to interview them? Because it's not as simple as they walk through the door, and often if I'm in a radio studio, the author will simply be delivered to me by the producer. They will come in, they will sit them down, go, Richard, this is Jeff, who's written a book about ants that wish they were blue. We go, oh, hello, Jeff. And then you kind of fire straight into it. In podcast land, it's a little bit different. You've got a very awkward kind of 5 minutes of, hello, no, volume up a bit. The camera's staring at your navel, all that kind of stuff. It can really affect how the interview and the podcast goes.
Well, yeah, 99% of podcasts are going to be set up that way. There's the few, the tenth of the top percentile where they have people over to their studio. I like the Rich Roll podcast, for instance, ultra marathon endurance athlete freak guy show, really super popular show in the US. And he has all of his guests just drop into his studio in Malibu in California, and that's how they record all their shows. And I would love to just invite these interviewers over, just get another microphone just like this, put it 180 degrees over there, and just say, just sit down and talk and do everything. But you have to tell them, like, okay, like you need to call from your computer, not your phone, and you need to update Zoom, and you need to have an Ethernet cable. And like, yes, no, really, it's important. Please wear headphones. Please don't use the microphone that's attached to the headphones, because you touch that and move your shirt and all that stuff. And they don't I don't want to slate anybody in particular.
That Neil guy, right?
Both my guests were good, but they are not podcasters. They just don't understand. They just want to pop in. They're giving you their time, but it's like, okay, yeah, but we still have audio standards, and if it sounds like complete garbage, then no one will listen, no matter how good your book was.
Matt, do you think have I ruined Nick there? I recognise a lot of the nags about the audio from the constant crap I give you lot.
I think very much you have had a seminal influence on young Nick's audio standards.
Well, I'm very sorry about that, Nick. But it's certainly true that there's occasionally you'll come across people who just don't get it and will be irritated that you're asking for such things. In fact, I remember Bradley Philpott, who was on our show last night, when he first came on Missed Apex, he just turned on a computer. Hi guys, because that's how you're used to speaking to your granddad or whatever on a video call. I'm like, can you go and get some headphones? Can you go and get this, that, and the other? And he admitted about 3 months later, he said, I found you so irritating when we first started podcasting together that you wanted all this sound stuff. But now that I'm all set up and I listen back to it, I go, oh yeah, no, that's how you make a podcast not too irritating. But it's you have to find the line, because there comes a point, Nick, that you might find over time where there's someone's just not going to get it, and you have to either decide, do you go, okay, thanks but no thanks, or do you put out a terrible piece of audio that you're going to have to go and fix loads later or something like that?
Well, I had an interview request, I guess, that I put out to an author that I really like, who I will not name, and he wrote back right away within hours, like, "Oh yeah, I'd be happy to chat." And I wrote back right away and said, "Okay, like here are the things I'd like to ask you. I'd like to talk about this book in particular, if you don't mind." Which I don't know if it was his most recent, but it was pretty recent. It came out in the last 2 years, and I said, and I wrote up a little thing. Here's what you need to sound as lovely as possible and why. Headphones, Ethernet, up to date Zoom, all this stuff. No response.
I just thought that's too much.
Maybe. I mean, it's been about a week, so that might just be the end of that interview because, oh, you want me to actually do things.
Yeah.
No, thank you. If I might make another observation, something that has been pretty challenging from switching from being the panelist to being the host and now really to being the interviewer with people who, don't go on podcasts every day, is making sure that when you go to them, you phrase it in the form of a question. So you would say, okay, I was reading your book and I got to this passage and it said blah, 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 and I really liked it. And they just look at you like, thanks. You have to make a question, and it can be hard to convert your emotions and feelings and what you're wondering about into a, intelligently phrased question to, authors who are the, most highly educated, most literate people. So there's that pressure as well.
Yeah, and it's the art of conversation and being a conversationalist and being able to not only say what you want to say, but hand the baton over to the next person. So a lot of the times I will completely abandon Matt, and you will hear him. It's usually my fault, Matt, when you kind of go, yep, okay. That's where when I've not given you a thread to just naturally move on to the next conversation, you have to go, yeah, okay, and then form your own start to a sentence.
Yeah, or I'm doing it to be funny.
Okay.
Or I'm just going, or you have a big long point and I know you want me to elaborate. And then because you always make fun of me for how many words I say, I will just say one to watch your face.
Yeah, I hate that. You hand over the baton and you just go, yep. And you go, ooh, you absolute git. We're on same team. Blue on blue, same team.
Oh, well, yeah, a little bit of banter is okay, right?
I should just note that all three of us are wearing blue today, which has been noted in the chat room. But yeah, it's like you said, you're trying to have a conversation. So you're trying to conduct an interview, and you have this list of questions, and you're very formal. And you go, okay, so when you created this character, did you have in mind the Shakespearean model of blah blah? But with having a natural conversation. But then you get into this back and forth with the author, and then your co-host is just sitting there, and then you feel like, oh no, like I haven't let my Dakota, who's the analogy to Matt here, get in. Oh, don't worry about that.
No. You get over that very quickly. It's fine. Give that a few years. You get over that. No, but Matt does take on that co-host role. But I think Matt trusts me enough that over the course of 100 shows, there's going to be a lot of Matt heavy ones, but there's going to be the odd one where you never interject yourself just for the sake of it. You're happy to go, oh, that didn't need me for that 20-minute slot, and the product is good at the end, so that's just part of being part of a team.
That is totally it. It has nothing to do with how entertaining the chat room is. Yes,
or the other thing is get yourself a live chat room, and Dakota will sit and go in the chat room. Actually, interesting question you said to me, Matt. You said, sorry, Nick. You said to me, sorry, you're right, it is the blue shirts are throwing everyone. Not only that, but me and Matt both have blue with pink trim. So Matt looks like he's got like a pink eagle on his, and I've got a pink camper van on the front of my t-shirt, which I'm not liking because the camper van has a natural curl, which is making me look like I've got more of it makes my ribs look like it's a belly. It's not. That's my ribs. So I don't like that. So I'm a bit upset about that. We'll have to de-coordinate in future shows, Matt.
I only have 2 of these exact same t-shirts, so that's going to be on you.
Fair enough. Where was I distracted from? Where did I distract myself from, Nick? Oh, yeah. Whether you should stream to like literally 4 people. And I was thinking, oh, yeah, you only really know of us as a podcasting outfit when we've had several hundred people dropping into the live stream. I think last night, 1,800 people watched the live one of Missed Apex, which makes it a really busy chat room and makes it worth doing. Obviously, here at the moment, I'm looking, we've got 40 people in our chat room at the moment, but me and Matt literally used to do it to 2, 3, 4, 5 people in the chat, but we just had it there in place for whenever we were going to explode onto the live streaming scene.
Well, I feel a little bit offended because I think I've actually been on Missed Apex since before we did YouTube at all.
No,
So I think
no chance.
yeah, I think I joined you guys summer of 17. I think it was that long ago. I don't think we were on YouTube then.
We've been live streaming. Okay, fair enough. I won't disparage your memory of it, but we've been live streaming since at least the 2014 F1 season, I think, Matt.
I think all those debuts have affected his memory.
Oh yeah, sorry about that, Nick. I on Missed Apex, I always say that it's your debut because the second time you came on, when I introduced you, I completely forgot that you'd been on before somehow, and I went, "Oh, here for the first time. Welcome, Nick Alexander," and you never let me forget it.
Yeah, and I know how that goes now because I had fellow Missed Apex panelist Sarah Nickel on my show, and I introduced her, and then I was like, "Oh, wait, it's her debut. I'm supposed to say something. Wait, no, she's been on before, right?" And I was actually wrong. It was her debut, and it was I see how it is.
There we go. It's hard. Let's go back to a bit of. Go on, Matt. Sorry, go on. Get in there.
I was going to Sarah, I've been here before, Nickel. Now she has a nickname.
I don't feel like that joke landed, so I'm going to just move on to spare your blushes. I'm even going to take you off the screen. It was that bad. There we go. Back to interviewing technique. Oh, he looks annoyed. He doesn't look like he's taking that like a joke. Back to interviewing technique. So you're speaking to these guys. You're asking your very intelligent questions. It's really hard then if they don't give you anything, if they do just give you very short answers, because what you suddenly realize is, oh my God, I've only got 4 questions here ready. Say for like a 10-minute segment on the radio, they'll go, yep. I go, okay, good. And who was the inspiration for this book? My mother, Jean. She was nice. And think, oh, blimey, I'm through 2/3 of my questions here already after 30 seconds.
Well, I'm only 2 author interviews in, but I have not had this problem whatsoever. So the authors that I've interviewed both seem to be very wordy. The opposite problem, anyways. The first guy, Neil, he self-described, said that he had the attention span of a mosquito. And you would ask him, we asked him, what were your influences? And he listed like 40 things, and then changed, went off on a tangent and said another thing. And it was like, okay, I guess he is good at keeping the airwaves going.
Yeah, no, and that's always nice because you think, well, you're doing my job for me, but you can go too far the other way, because if I am a Nick Alexander fan, which I am, and I want to tune into the, books can be hard, but stick with it. Honestly, don't just get the audiobook podcast. That's what your podcast is called. If I'm a fan of Nick Alexander, I don't necessarily want to not hear Nick. So there's a balance. You also want to talk, and you have to hope that people who are tuning in are a little bit there for you as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting if I start to get any feedback when I have an author interview when they bring their own fans and they'll say, "Oh, it was really great to see my favorite author on this show, but like, who's this idiot hosting it?
Well,
and why did he conduct it?"
That never happened to you, did it, Spanners?
Yeah, all right. I feel attacked now. So, for those of you unfamiliar with the F1 show, every month we have a very, very famous F1 journalist called Joe Saywood. He had a big online following for his blog and his publications. And when he first started doing the podcast with us, a lot of his audience hated me, Nick. And they would literally say, "Who's this Wally? Why is that guy talking all the time?" And they would literally go like, "Why is he talking?" They just wanted me to go, "Joe, tell us things about the F1.
Right. So, I mean, it wasn't really supposed to be a dig. It was supposed to be a reference. I remember that. I'm alluding to it, and I fully expect it to happen to me as well.
So there's a balance. So I'm going to use 2 interviewers as my reference point for this. So Mark Merrin, I'm sure you'll have heard of Mark Merrin, who does a very interviewee style podcast, and also more recently Conan O'Brien. So two very different guys, obviously both very talented. Mark Maron, a good comedian and a good comedic actor. But, for example, on the Conan O'Brien show, he is very much being Conan as much as he can. And he probably speaks more than the person he's interviewing, but then I listen to that podcast to listen to Conan O'Brien. So I would download that podcast, whether he was interviewing Mel Gibson or a small rock. I would still download it. Whereas Mark Maron, his method of interviewing people is really trying to draw stuff out of the person he's interviewing, Matt. Like Tom, who's that guy from the Beyond the Grid podcast, the F1? Tom, it's escaping my head now.
Christensen?
Tom Clarkson, that's the one, Tom Clarkson. So he's always going, and how did that make you feel? Like a therapist chair. How does it feel driving at 100 miles an hour? Are you scared? Are you ever scared for your life? Tell me how scared you are. And he's just trying to suck things out of them. Whereas with Conan, he's part of the conversation as well. So with Mark Maron, I will only click on it if it's, a really interesting person I want to click on. With Conan, I'll always download every episode. So you have to kind of pick where you want to be on that spectrum, Nick.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I'm trying to let the authors shine when I have them on. Maybe I'll make it more about me when we do not have a special guest.
Okay, brilliant. Well, good luck with that. Really interesting to see how your podcasting goes on. Don't pod fade again. It's very naughty. You get a free pass for once. If you pod fade again, you have to give up forever and ever and ever. Matt, please tell me why you are in trouble with the law.
Well, since you so kindly ask, as you know, and as you reference, it has been hard. It has been quite hard to maintain sort of your normal exercise schedule in this unlandmarked swamp of improbability that we find ourselves in. But I've been making an effort. I got some new shoes, and I had noticed that later in the day, our parks get exceedingly full. Like dangerously full. So I had made the effort Saturday morning to go out and get my run in. And now I've taken there's sort of two joggers lanes. There's two car size lanes that the bikers use. And then there's a little shoulder off to the right because we go counterclockwise. And that's the farthest you can run in the park is along the shoulder. And I'd taken to running there because simply there were fewer people there. I had to go around fewer people. I had to go into bike lanes fewer times to pass at a safe distance. And so I was there making my run. Here's a jogger going slowly. So I swing out to go around them at a safe distance and I get whoop, whoop. It was the cops behind me. I'm like, okay, well, whatever. I pass the person at a safe distance and they get on the loudhailer and they're like, you can't run in the car lane. And now I realize this is probably not the smartest thing to do. But I turned around and said, am I not supposed to pass at a safe distance? And this started a conversation that I hadn't anticipated.
So you completely just back-chatted cops. Right, okay.
Totally.
I'll take things white people can do for $200, please, Matt.
Yeah, and to be fair, if I don't exercise that privilege on behalf of those who wouldn't dare, what kind of a human being would I be?
Nick.
I assume that he is just proving to the police officer that he is a local resident when he shows that kind of back chatter.
It's a brave move, Matt, because especially in New York, they are armed. I adopt a much more polite demeanor with officers, so I am always, whether they're right or wrong, they're right. Yes, sir. No, sir. Just make things as easy as I can for them to just dismiss the situation and send me on my way. But you're like they're finger pointing. How did the cop take it?
Oh, just about as well as you might expect. They rolled up alongside me, demanded that I stop running. I refused and said, I'm perfectly fine. I can hear you at this speed. And I said, look, I was just passing someone, but I realized I don't think they could actually hear what I was saying. And so, and I didn't bother to make the real point, which is, I'm sorry, this is a park. It is not a racetrack. And I don't think that your 5 seconds saved while I get around someone safely is worth all the effort that you're putting into it. I mean, like, you simply need to have a different mind about how you are doing this job. And yeah, I didn't make that point, and eventually I just sort of gave up. I'm like, yep, I got you, goodbye, and that was the end of that. But I was not thrilled because it's already hard enough to do what I was trying to do, and now they're trying to make it even harder.
Do you think there's been an overzealous, and this is just opinion, I've not witnessed any overzealousness from UK police, even though it has been somewhat publicised, some early cases of over-eager police officers telling people not to play in their front yards, which is actually perfectly fine, and also like going through people's shopping baskets and going, why are you wasting your time buying that? It has since been clarified. You can go out in your front yard, and if it's sold in the shops that you're allowed to go in, then you're allowed to buy it. There's no problem with that. Do you get more of a sense that there's a bit of an overzealousness in enforcement in Brooklyn?
Well, not in Brooklyn. I think in New York City in general. It's an interesting thing. In the early 90s, I actually was a bartender for a bit, and it was a cop bar. So I got to know personally a very large number of policemen, and the majority of them, at least when I was around them, and they were like, savagely drunk, which is mostly what they were decent people. But to me, it's like common sense versus compliance. It's like they're demanding compliance. You must get out of a lane. I believe this is a car lane, versus common sense. Oh, people are exercising in the park. If this person runs in the middle of the lane and I need to get around them, after a few seconds, I'll give them a boot so that they get out of my way. I'm not going to demand that they run in a specific place, because that's not really anything we should be doing right now. We should be using common sense and being safe. And I think it's honestly a training thing. And it's been an ongoing problem for a large number of years.
I'm just amazed that, like I've always seen policemen as just like this ultimate authority. And when I was a kid, like you can see that I've got kind of a babyish face at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. I've got a weird round baby head. Fine, got it. But when I was like 17, it was even worse. So when I first started driving a car and a motorbike at 17, I would get pulled over like constantly, all the time. Like we're talking at least weekly. They would see my little face in a car and go, why has that small child stolen that car? So to see my face driving around in my Austin Montego in 1997, they would pull me over. And it was the same questions all the time. So you get very used to, yes, sir. No, sir. Yeah, here's my driving license. And they would ask me questions that would trip up a 14-year-old. So you had to take a driving theory test and a practical test. So they would say to me, like, have you passed your license? Yes, sir. Which parts? And you go, both of them. And so, like, they were trying to trip me up with like really simple questions because I looked impossibly young to be in or on a vehicle.
Did they not just look at the date on the license and say, okay, or maybe call it in and double check and say, all right, on your way. Sorry, you just looked young and I needed to check.
Well, this was
what I would have done.
This was back before photo IDs as well. So they would look at the paper license. We didn't have photo IDs in the 90s.
What?
Yeah.
What kind of lack of technology is that? I had a photo license in 1982.
Yeah, we didn't have them.
16-year-old in Georgia.
So our photo
Oh my
ID, passport had a photo ID, obviously. But no, driving licenses didn't have a photo card probably until the late 90s, I think. And there was a long period as well where you kind of had grandfathered rights. So if you had a paper license, you didn't need to get it renewed for ages. Whereas now everyone's used to having their driving license.
I cannot believe this. This is a thing that I absolutely did not know, and is an American is utterly fascinating to me. Was all of Europe like this, or is it just the UK?
I don't know. We don't know what those crazy Europeans get up to, but they're at the time as well. Like obviously, I would be out late at night, 17, 18, because you either going to a club or picking your friends up or going and socializing. So the amount of maybe I'm tainted by the amount of 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock conversations with police officers, where even though you're sober, you're trying to appear as sober as possible because you don't want the pain in the arse of being breathalyzed, having to wait for the breathalyzer. Or the other one they'll do is go, oh, well, we don't have any equipment, you'll have to come to the station, that kind of thing. And yeah, I remember just constantly playing this game with cops on UK roads in the late 90s. So to hear you kind of turn around and you're going, you know what? Nick, would you ever speak to a policeman like that?
Yeah, I did one time. I got pulled over one time driving on the Autobahn in Austria, in a rented Mercedes that I picked up in Munich. And this still makes me mad. This was in 2013. I'm still furious about it. So, famously, on the German Autobahn, there are many stretches where there is no speed limit.
Correct.
And there is a sign to indicate that there's no speed limit, obviously. And it's like a circle with the 3 slash lines going through it. Sometimes it'll have a number in the middle. That's just telling you it was the speed limit in kilometers, and now it is unlimited speed, unbegrenzt. And in Austria, they have the same sign for unlimited speed limit, but they have a federal speed limit, which I did not know.
Right, so it's the same in the UK. We say there's a sign that means unrestricted, but it means unrestricted up to the national speed limit. Yeah, I know.
Well, anyways, I was going 190 in a 130 kilometer
kilometers.
Federal speed limit in a rented shiny black Mercedes with foreign plates. Got pulled over by the Austrian police and was asked to explain myself, and was having a hard time understanding them because they're Austrian, which is possibly racist. But I mean, I speak German.
Yeah, that needed clarifying. Yeah.
I speak German. I do not speak Austrian. So, but I was arguing with them. Well, in Germany this and Germany that, whatever, which was only making the situation worse because they.
So you were in Austria, basically yelling at them for not doing things like the Germans and saying, "Well, in Germany I could do this." That probably doesn't go down that well, if I'm honest.
Right. And I got breathalyzed, and I blew a 0,00, of course, and you could just see the disappointment on their face. Like they wanted nothing more than to drag me in for, being 0.01 over the limit for some reason. And I had to pay a fine on the spot in cash, which I thought was really weird. But my German companion assured me was quite normal there. So you talk about weird police interactions. You get a ticket in America, you mail a check in. In Austria, they hold out their hand and they're like, give cash now. What is that about?
Was your German companion surreptitiously filming the whole thing to laugh about later with all of their comrades?
Well, I think he felt the same way about everything as I did.
So yeah, a few things on that. In Manila, it's very common for police to basically ask for a bribe. And don't come and sue me, Manila Federal Police Force or whatever, because that you're far away and it would be inconvenient to attend the court date. But yeah, it would be very common there to go, right, there's a trumped up charge, and that to make the policeman go away, it's a certain number of pesos. And they will try and pick people, quite often white people, because they will assume that they have money. But also if you look more middle class, they will try and just extort money from you. My cousin basically was making out with his girlfriend in a car, and like this guy was threatening he was going to like arrest him for public indecency and stuff, and my cousin was arguing it, and then he kind of went, oh yeah, no, money. And so he was like, oh well, I hope there's not a fine because I've only got this much money on me. And then the policeman will say, oh well, actually that covers it, that's the fine, and then take the money away. But it's hard because if you ever suggest that you want to pay a bribe, you are then you're in trouble because it's really against the law to bribe a police officer, even though a lot of the time that is definitely what they want from you.
Right. Well, then you have to make those charges go away with another bribe offer, and it's just bribes all the way down.
Exactly. And I know for a fact that my mother got her driving license with a bribe at an official station as well, because that's just how that works.
But did it have a photo ID?
Mark Greenow backs me up here in case I was misremembering things. And Mark Greenow, he's called in. He looks way older than me. He said, this is true. Sorry, Mark. We're probably the same age. It was just a piece of paper. You didn't even have to carry it with you. That's true as well, Matt. Yeah, you did not have to have your driving license with you. You'd get given a producer, and then you had to turn up at the police station within 2 weeks with all your docs.
That's actually really interesting. When I started voting here in the United States, you were not required to have a photo ID. All you had to do was sign the voter roll. And that's in all of the places I've lived, that rule has never changed. And I never produce a photo ID when I vote. My wife from Florida, who's a bit younger than me, always does. And it's just sort of a fascinating thing where if I didn't grow up having to do it and it's not been legally changed, there's no way you're going to get me to start doing it now, because I feel like it's almost like a weird slippery slope kind of an argument, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does a bit.
Well, I don't even know why we're arguing about this, because over here in Washington and Oregon, we just mail our ballots in. So we're having this big national debate about whether it's possible to vote by mail in a pandemic. And the whole West Coast is over here just like, guys, we already do this. It's fine. It'll work. We promise.
It's not really a debate so much as it's just a tactic by certain people.
Yeah, look, I have big concerns about having to produce photo ID at a ballot. It definitely does. Oh, people are going to get angry. I'm sorry. It definitely does discriminate against certain groups for whom there is more of a barrier to getting photo ID. There's more of a barrier to go through that officialdom before you vote. I wasn't planning to go off on a rant about this at all, but whereas it is possible, there are so many more barriers to getting all the correct documentation when you're from an ethnic minority, or when you don't tick, white, British, etc. on every form. For example, I find that when I registered to vote, I registered to vote, it got rejected. Then I had to go down to the council office, and it will be down to my place of birth, my registered ethnicity. I'm sure that there is perfectly reasonable steps that they feel they have to take to make sure I'm who I say I am. But then I have to go down. Okay, so that's the first obstacle. They've said, no, you don't have, we haven't got enough info, please come in. So you come in and they say, okay, it looks okay, but actually we need an appointment with such and such a person. Can you come back at such and such a time? Oh, okay, you come back at such and such a time. You're sat there and you're waiting half an hour, and then you have to speak to the person, you have to do a thing. Whereas, Jeff down the road just sends off for his ballot paper and he gets his ballot paper. Just through pure numbers and statistics, more people like me are going to fall off at some point on that stage, and therefore less people like me are going to vote. So the more barriers you put up there, even if you do it with the best of intentions, that is indirectly discriminating.
I would say that it is an intentional tactic, certainly in this country, and that there is a dearth of data suggesting that there are any good intentions at this point associated with those kinds of barriers.
Well, I'm not trying to insinuate whether it's deliberate or anything like that. All I'm trying to do is tell people who never have any problems getting hold of documentation that actually there can be significant barriers to documentation. And I've faced that in a number of ways. Like, getting hold of my birth certificate was an absolute nightmare. Getting passports, some people you can just turn up at the Peterborough passport office and get one in an hour. That's just not an option that's available to me, because there's so many more hoops and stuff to go through. So I'm not insinuating it's deliberate. I'm just saying if you put those barriers up, there are unintended consequences. And I didn't mean to go down that path at all. I did not mean to go down that path. So sorry if that got a bit ranty. I want to end the show by talking to Nick about his dog. What's it like owning a dog, Nick? You've got a little foofy, fluffy dog. I always wonder why people would get a dog when you have to take it for walks all the time and pick up its poop.
Okay. Well, actually, I think having to take a dog for a walk is a very good thing, because it makes you go for a walk.
Yes.
And certainly at these times, that might be the only way that you're going to convince yourself to get out of the house, because there is nowhere else to go. So it's coming in clutch right now.
Do you think that has played a part? Because what we've found is, because I don't know what you're like, we're restricted to one exercise a day. Is it similar?
No.
Oh, you can just go out whenever you want.
Oh, yeah. So, and we don't have overly aggressive policing around
Oh,
here
right.
by any stretch of the imagination.
Oh,
People
okay.
can do whatever we want, and we discourage it. So we try to close off parking lots and put up tape around parks and stuff like that. But I haven't heard of a whole lot. There's been some, but not a whole lot of like active dispersing.
Right.
And no tickets, no arrests, nothing. And then even in some states, you can storm the state capitol building and they won't even make you leave. So it's very different here.
Okay, we're not going to get into. Hang on. What are they? Terrorists or militia?
Oh,
Yes.
They're Second Amendment proponents.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. That's interesting, Matt. They're just your friendly neighborhood militia.
They are not a well-regulated militia because I know historically what one is, and they do not meet that standard. I am sorry, but that is just simply a fact. And what they are is a very well-funded group of protesters aimed specifically at one or two issues.
Okay, I think the less said about that, the better. I was trying to lead to a nice friendly conversation about my cat, and you've all gone down the militia path, Nick.
I'm sorry, dogs, and cats.
No, well, look, so here, it's quite interesting. I didn't realise that you guys were under such a lax lockdown. It doesn't even sound like a lockdown at all. In the UK, most people seem to think we're under a very harsh lockdown. But like, for example, in Spain, Nick, people have only just been allowed to exercise outdoors at all.
Right. And I've heard a weird comment from a coworker that was some poor logic, I will say, that it's kind of like, well, it's not really that bad with the virus in America because we're not even really locked down. I mean, it's not like we can't leave our houses. It's not like Spain. And it's like, well, yeah, but 3 times as many people have died here than they have in Spain. So maybe it is bad. And maybe we should be locked down harder, not you jumping to conclusions based on the government response.
So what they've done in New York is they've basically closed every place that you would go to that's indoors. So bars, restaurants, theaters, movies. The grocery stores are open, hardware stores are open, and that's about it. So you can go buy your groceries. You can leave your house and go take an exercise. You are required to wear a mask if you're going to be in a situation where you can't be far enough away from people. And what I have observed, at least in my own little neighborhood, is that most people are following these general guidelines for themselves. There is a group of people who won't and never will, but I think that's true of almost every society, and they've not got to the point where they're going to demand that you stay indoors 23 hours a day, and if your name starts with the letter R, you're allowed to exercise between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. every alternate Tuesday. We've not gotten there yet, but at least in New York, the way that they have done it has resulted in positive change overall. So we are locked down, and there's definitely not a lot you can do other than just walk around. And I think what's helped too is that the weather has been not great for us.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see if it lasts into proper springtime, if you know what I mean.
Right, and we have had historically nice weather around here. The driest April in the Seattle area since 1979.
Well, there we go. So at least you've got global warming to cheer up cheer up your climate and your weather. No, it's really interesting to hear the different comparisons and what you can and can't do, because here you're allowed out for 1 exercise a day and you can go and get your shopping, and that's pretty much about it. So because we're restricted to 1 exercise, if Nicola's working in the shed till 2, I think, right, we won't all go out as a family because we'll save it for when Mum's free, and then she finishes work and then she's like, do you know what, I can't actually be bothered. And it's like, oh yeah, no, yeah, it's late now. And we never get round to it because we're saving it up. We never get round to it. And also I don't go for my run in the morning, because if I go for a run in the morning, that's ruined our whole prospect. I've ruined the whole family's one freedom for the day. So we've got a bit better at trying to make sure we do go out for that walk. But our cat has started coming with us, Nick, and he's always been a cat that's tried to follow us out. In the end, we've given up. And so we're now out, like, with the dog walkers. Our cat has gotten pretty good at staying with us. Pretty much stays to heel. I mean, you saw the video I sent you yesterday. He pretty much either stays to heel or walks in front of us. And we are now just a mad family that we go for our little stroll, and we've got this big white fluffy cat just bounding along next to us. So I have to say, though, we don't pick up its poop.
Well, why not? Is it pooping on your neighbor's lawns? I'm sure they do not appreciate that.
I hope so. I hate my neighbors, so that would be nice. But anyway, if you have any stories of your cat following you around, I would love to know if our cat is just some weird freak. At first, we tried to keep putting him back and sending him indoors, but now we've just given up. So part of our lockdown walk is, Matt, you've got cats. Take your cat for a walk. See how it goes.
No, but Mitchell in the chat room takes his cat for a walk on a lead.
On a
no less.
lead. No way. We have actually got a cat lead. We've never used it. Luca says, I just pulled a hair out of my cat's butt. So that's my cat experience today. Good. That seems like a brilliant note to end the show on. I think, Matt. That's we're not topping that, are we?
No, unless we talk about the cat that locked the dog in the cage on Twitter yesterday, but we can say that for another time.
So the name of today's episode is Cats. Sometimes you have to pull hair out of their butts.
It's quite a long title. We'll see. Thank you very much for joining us, Nick Alexander, at Nick Alexander F1 on Twitter. And your book podcast is called What's It About Podcast. And you recently have an interview with author something.
2 author interviews this week with Neil Howell and Amy Stewart.
Fantastic. Go check him out. Matt is at MattPT55 on Twitter. Catch us here tomorrow. You can keep up with us. Look at our Twitter at Indoors Remain, and I'm at Spanners Ready. Tune in tomorrow at 2 p.m. and we'll be joined by the absolutely delightful actress Alice Ryan. We're going to talk about food preparation in lockdown, some of the food challenges and some of the food delights we've had, and also talk a little bit about the process of acting and movie making. So I'm really looking forward to that. I will see you again then here at about 2 p.m.-ish. We've been doing fairly well at starting on time. So look, we're reasonably reliable. So just make sure that you work hard, have fun, and be kind. But above all, remain indoors. Getting better at that. Yeah, getting better at that. The rest of the show, garbage. But the end bit, getting a little better at that.